So we've reached the point in this series, Loving Unconditionally, where you're going to explain about expanding our awareness so that we can find the love which you say is innate within us, and really is a fundamental part of our being, and we are in many ways embodiments of the love. And last time we went more within ourselves and explored thoughts and feelings, but I think you're saying that there's a much greater part of us and a much greater awareness there for us to explore. So this one's about expanding our awareness, and that's the title of the third chapter in your book, Unconditional Love, An Unlimited Way of Being. So where I'm going to start is to read the header paragraph, which introduces the paragraph, and we'll take it from there. Beyond our thoughts and feelings is another realm, the realm of spirit. This is the divine aspect in each of us. Ever guiding and watching, this inner self is the highest possibility of all possibilities. It is the knower, doer, and deed of all experience. Within the center of our hearts beats the flame of unconditional love, and that love beckons us to become all that it is. When we merge with our potential, we know I am that potential. Okay.
Well, as we continue on this unfolding journey, this unfolding process of greater conscious recognition of who we truly are, it makes sense that if we look back, for me in particular, I look back at who I was and how I related to life in almost a strictly outer sense. I acted and reacted to people, places, and things in my outer world. I had certainly some hopes and some dreams. I had some ideas, desires, and then I also had, preponderance of challenges, problems, issues that I constantly, wrestled with, tackled, worked with, worked around, ignored, suppressed, ran from. But this constant outer focus really was such a narrow field of understanding of who I really was. And it wasn't until I started to go within, until I started to recognize, wait a minute, who am I? Asking some fundamental questions. How do my thoughts and feelings relate to the world? How do my thoughts and feelings relate to my hopes and dreams and what I can create? How does my whole series of belief systems, traditions, expectations, acceptances of suggestions of those around me, trying to fit in, trying to justify my life, trying to be accepted by others, how does all this relate when I go within? And in this exploration that we keep kind of unfolding and peeling back, it's natural that we would go to the next level. Okay, let's start to notice thoughts and feelings. Let's start to notice what am I thinking? Am I being an inner critic? Am I being an affirmative person both to myself and to the world around me? Do I feel good about myself? Do I feel good about my experience of life? Am I putting into motion the things that I wish to create in my life based on who I am versus based on all of what I, perceive or think I'm supposed to be doing, essentially for everyone else? Because when we are outwardly focused, we tend to relate to all of the external aspects of our lives and all the external reflections. Yet when we start to go within, we start to notice that there's quite a rich experience kind of hidden within us. There's the seeking of love in the outer. All of a sudden we start to realize the love's right there inside us. We start to go within, we start to explore greater self-acceptance, unconditional acceptance, allowing ourselves to be a part of this world and start to notice the interconnectedness and the interdependence of all these different elements, that our life is not just external. Our life is extraordinarily internal in relationship to everything around us. And in fact, when we do start looking for the love in the right place, for my perspective, going within and finding it right there within us, then as we cultivate that love, we start to give that love to everyone and everything around us. And our experiences start to change, literally. There's another dimension in a way, or another layer, another part that we start to also understand as we go within deeper and start to realize more and more of our pure potential, and actually accept more of, you know, our true gifts, our true talents, our true desires, and start to really listen to our inner heart. In this space, in this continuum of our exploration, we start to really notice things that we had never noticed before. And in the inner realms of our consciousness, there's quite a bit to explore. And as you know, we've mentioned before, sometimes that is the very thing that keeps people perhaps from wanting to explore themselves, is because we do tap into this rather infinite potential. And what do you do with it? You know, when we've lived a very straight and very specific life with certain quite limited expectations, then to find out that we have extraordinary power, to find out that we actually have an intense potential to become anything we want, and we can change that numerous times over, then all of a sudden we start to realize just what's right there within us. And for some, that actually can be scary. Perhaps even in my initial stages, that might have been one of the reasons why I didn't go into it originally, even though I had probably some hints early on, you know, to explore more of myself. But I really looked out to the outer world originally as everything that was tangible was real, and that was what was real for me. Going inside and going internal, expanding my consciousness, not only to recognize my thoughts and feelings, but to go even deeper and to realize that there's even more beyond the thoughts and feelings, that there are all these energy patterns. That's when I started to find out how vast and multidimensional I was. And thankfully for me, that became very enticing and encouraging, because that was far more interesting in a way than my everyday routine, my everyday ritual, my habits. You know, getting up and preparing for, say, a daily routine, a daily activity, and going through all the motions, coming home and then, you know, taking some extracurricular activity to keep my attention off of what I'd just been doing, and then going back to bed and, you know, repeating these routines over and over again. Now, with this inner exploration, I found there was really no end to what I could find out about myself, life, the universe, and everything. In fact, that was very intriguing, because now, where I thought I knew some things, and I thought I was fairly good at some things, knowing that I didn't know everything, but I certainly felt proud about the things I did know, now I was beginning to realize I didn't know anything. Because hidden in plain sight was this whole vast additional experience that was going on. While I was going through my normal rituals or routines originally, there was all this other stuff going on. And I think I've made the example before, like, you know, how no two people can actually have the same experiences. If we're going down a street or a pathway or a roadway, you know, on a bike or by foot or by car, and, you know, we're looking more or less ahead of us and going to a particular destination, there's stuff going on to our right, to our left, above us, below us, behind us, and we simply don't have the capacity with our limited five sensory abilities to actually incorporate all of what's going on. We also don't then have the capacity to incorporate not only what we visually see or may smell or may taste or may touch, but we don't actually have the capacity, or we have not honed the capacity, to recognize all the dimensional things that are going on, like all the things that cause, you know, as we're going down the street, you know, we're looking at plants and trees perhaps on one side, and their entire structures, organisms going on that within that whole process that we're vaguely aware of as we visit it, as we pass by it, as we look at it. There's constant growth, decay, there's recycling, there's interaction, you know, photosynthesis, synergistic components. Well, if we look out the other side and we maybe see the water, there's the ebb and flow, there's the tides, there's the constant changes of temperatures and all these types of things. You know, we look at the rocks below us, and just below that surface, you know, there are earthworms, and there are organisms, and there's depth of strata of ancient times, and we look up above into the sky, and we start to notice the clouds, and, you know, but beyond the clouds there's moisture, there's interaction. All of this is going on simultaneously. It is so vast, so unbelievably huge. When we just contemplate the external, can we even fathom what it's like to go internally and start to explore all these hidden depths. As, you know, we scientifically know we use what, 5% of our brain. 5%, and we can accomplish all the things that we accomplish with 5% or less than our brain capacity. Well, if we were to limit it and say, okay, we've got an additional 95%, we simply cannot comprehend at this particular moment, with our beliefs and our structures and our limitations and our views externally, that there's this vastness within. And yet when we start to explore, when we go and we acknowledge the thoughts and the feelings, and we say, well, there's energy in thought, there's energy in feeling, these are real things. Where's that coming from? Where's the original imaginative thought coming from? You know, when we're not just associating one thought to another, which is really conjuring up our memories, but we're actually looking and experiencing and intuiting and having spontaneous new ideas that really have never been conceived of before. You know, that's the realm that we're talking about of really expanding our awareness. You know, we understand love. Now we understand it's within us. We understand the beginning mechanics of who we are through our thoughts and our feelings, how we can create. And, you know, we can, in a way, stop there. If people just want to create their life by using their thoughts and feelings, positive affirmation, all those types of things, they can certainly continue on. And yet, just below that surface is this incredible, multidimensional aspect. Because now we begin to contemplate, we begin to become aware of the fact that all these so-called synchronicities, these coincidences, these happen chances, these moments where, you know, we think of someone and they show up, or we have this intuitive idea that we shouldn't go somewhere, and then lo and behold, it turns out that was a really good thing we didn't go there. You know, we find out later of some information. Now we're going to the realm of pure spirit, pure wisdom, pure intelligence, that aspect of us that, you know, as we sit here right now having this conversation, billions of cells, trillions of physiological chemical interactions going on as we sit here. You know, we're not only just having conversation, but our bodies are breathing, the electromagnetics are firing, the nervous system is working, the brain is operating, the heart is pumping, and the cells are regenerating. There's a myriad of things going on. And that is still just not even the tip of the iceberg of what's really happening, because we're also acting and interacting with the space around us, plus we're physically interacting with the earth at large. We're tuning into all the things that are happening on the subtlest of levels. Where does this wisdom, this interconnective thread, this love that binds us all together and allows us to flow in such great harmony more often than not? Because truly that is the case. Even in the most difficult situations, there is a harmony going on. There's you know, what appears to be chaos is extraordinarily well orchestrated in those moments. And in fact, when we start to tune in deeper and go further within, we start to really resonate with this natural flow, this wisdom, this part of us that is connected to all of it. And you know, we can start to realize that we have our own presence about us. We have our own collective presence. We're not just our physical bodies. We're just not just our memories and our hopes and our dreams, but we're a whole energetic package. You know, we're a spiritual body, a physical body, a mental body, emotional body, and we're still more than that. We're a higher self. We have an aspect of us that knows our past, our present, and our future, guides us, shows us, whispers to us, giving us ideas that are uniquely appropriate for us, giving us encouragement that is essentially just right for us at the right moment. Well, when we're so outwardly focused, when we're so caught up in the outer experiences, when we're so in our heads, in our angers, our fears, our doubts, our separation, our worries, our guilts, our shames, or moments of euphoria, moments of joy, whatever we may be, you know, experiencing in the outer, we are really so separate from this inner wise connection that we don't listen to it. I certainly didn't. You know, for the very great part of my life, until I started to wake up to my own personal awareness of who I am in a bigger scheme of things, I didn't listen. You know, I just kept going on and going on and going on and outer. And it wasn't until I started to go in, discover my initial states of, you know, okay, I have personal power and kind of positive affirmation. But the deeper I went, the more amazing the journey became. Because the more I saw all this potential in me, the more I saw the potential in others. The more I saw the potential in others, the more I stopped seeing through the eyes of judgment, and the more I started to see through the eyes of compassion. Well, what does that speak of? It speaks of letting the love flow, the love that I have within. So there's a true, genuine, eternal value to reconnecting to ourselves, because we still act and have experiences in the outer, but with this whole vast new additional recognition of a greater consciousness, a greater interconnectedness. Now we bring this expanded consciousness out into our world, and we have a completely different experience. So it is kind of in a way a process. We're going within, we're expanding, but then we're going to take this expansion out into our world and really experience life with fresh new eyes literally every moment.
So when we open the door to this hugely expanded place within us, which, I mean, initially could feel quite overwhelming, do we need to start exploring it ourselves by beginning to read and listen to other people who could explain it to us, or is it a case of, if we're aware that there is more, this greater part of us within, it starts revealing itself to us, and we become more aware of the thoughts and feelings that are coming perhaps from within that we'd never listened to before?
Yes and yes.
Oh, good.
It is in a way a beginning without end, a circular flow. It is an experience that, by our intention, by our desire to go within, perhaps by coming across a conversation like this that simply reflects what we've already been thinking or contemplating, or the odd book falls off the shelf, because all of these things happen. And certainly at some point I started to look for it more, and there was instantly you go into a typical large-scale bookstore where there's seemingly tens of thousands of books. Where would one begin? And yet, interestingly enough, when I started to want to explore more of this particular understanding, books that I would have passed by 1,000 times before all of a sudden were right there and had been on the shelves for years. There's a tremendous amount of awareness that sits there available to us all the time. And certainly when I started this, it was literally more books on shelves and cassette tapes, and things that came into my life, which kind of begins to answer the second part. Yes, it starts to find us. Is that nowadays we have more or less instant access to an almost infinite amount of resources through online activity, through the World Wide Web, that wasn't functional when I started. So I can pretty much go out, and if I have a question of anything, I can find some type of information. Of course, it requires a sense of discernment, because that's one of the things we do learn on the pathway is, where is the information coming from, and does it really resonate? I've said that in every book I've ever written. From the get-go, in the beginning, I share with people is that if this resonates with you, great. If it does not, put it down and move along, because it's not here to convince anyone of anything, because it's impossible ultimately if we understand it. We cannot convince ourselves of what is and who we are, because that's a personal journey. So yes, as we begin the intention to explore more ourselves, that intention is met by the universe, so to speak, coming back to us and delivering answers to our questions. And maybe that's one of the keys to this whole process of unfolding. Are we asking the right questions? Are we asking to be saved from some experience in the outer, or are we asking to actually know who we are? That type of questioning can be the difference from night and day. The answer will come to both. And yet one will give us a more permanent release and understanding and a knowledge and a wisdom of who we are, and the other may or may not solve an immediate problem only for it to reappear again. So we're going to a causal level. We're peeling back the layers of all the beliefs, all the traditions, all the rituals, all the limiting thoughts, limiting feelings, the limiting experiences that we keep recirculating in our lives. We're peeling it back to get to more of a core essence, because when we come to that core essence, that love, and we start to express from that unbridled, uninhibited sense of joy and compassion and wisdom and power and all of these things in perfect balance, then we start to become causal, and then we are no longer constantly trying to fix effects based on our limited thinking. So it sets about a very different kind of approach. And all of this is happening because we do have a natural presence about us, a higher self, an aspect of us that will mold and bring to us the appropriate pieces on our journey. There's this wisdom that connects us, that knows us intrinsically and us in relationship to life around us. That when we listen to it, when we listen to the inner guidance, the inner wisdom, when we pay attention to our heart, because for some of us it's like, how do you tap into this? I have no tangible connection to this presence. I can't say that there's a guardian angel or a being or something that I see. It's just a knowing. And it's a knowing that I've allowed to cultivate in my world by allowing myself to connect to it. Other people might have more visual experiences, or they may have more auditory experiences. They may have a deeper telekinetic experience. They really feel this presence about them. For me, it's been just kind of almost in the realm of intuition, that just off the field of our frame of reference. But it's a knowing and it's a connection that the more I've connected with it, the deeper it has grounded itself in me, the more I've realized it's always been there, that it will always be there. This is the natural part of me that is the sum of all my parts and more so. It's that natural part of me that understands who I am on a broad, infinite level. And the more I connect with that, the more joy I can have in my daily experiences, because I'm connected to me. Because in fact, this higher self isn't outside of me. It's not something that is, it's something that we attain by reaching out. It is something that is intrinsically a part of us. It's just more of me. Am I outward focused? I'm limited in my awareness, and I'm just, concentrating on one little narrow aspect of life. It's going to be very difficult to simultaneously connect with this broad aspect. And yet what I found over the last 2 decades, the more I cultivate my connection in this broadness, this grandness, this majestic aspect, this infinite aspect of me, the more when I am focused on something in the outer world, I bring that fullness with me. So it's like I'm aware of the things that I used to focus in a very almost one-dimensional way. Now I can look at things and they're very multidimensional. I've learned very simple techniques to just simply be present in the moment. That's the quickest way to connect with, because that's when we're physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually one. Take a deep breath. That connects us, because now we're feeling the breath in our body, so we're physical. That means we're harmonizing our physical, emotional, mental, and our spiritual aspect. Now we're becoming more whole, rather than fracturing ourselves off in different directions. I'll be out in my garden, gazing upon initially perhaps a typical thing where I'm just kind of looking, say, at a plant or, at a tree or a leaf or the grass. And the way I used to be is like, I'd usually just walk through the garden. I wouldn't even stop. And the old cliche is stop and smell the roses. I now pay attention to that. And when I do that, I find that I will actually start to expand my consciousness, say when I'm standing out in my garden, where I would have normally perhaps originally just passed through. Then I started to stop and pay attention, but I'd noticed the very physical elements, the plant leaf, perhaps the grass and what stage of growth it was in, or a tree or something like that. Now when I stand there, I let myself expand to a fuller experience where I noticed the dancing of the sunlight through the leaves. I noticed how the gentle breezes move the leaves. And the more I expand my consciousness, where I was heretofore just noticing perhaps the odd plant, now I start to see the little bugs flitter about, the little geckos running around, and I start to notice the little, insects flying around. Then I start to become aware of the fact that there's livingness, there's a living aspect going on, that while I'm standing there, there's photosynthesis going on. I can actually tune into that experience where the plants are actually in that moment where they seem to be static. They are in fact highly organic and moving in their own ways. They're growing roots and they're growing up towards the sun, and they're moving as the sun moves during the day. And there's all the interaction of the bugs and the insects and the other animals. And then I'm aware of the fact that just underneath my feet, there are little earthworms, recycling material to prepare it for another activity. And there's decay going on that will become something else at another point. And it's almost as I open up, I merge with the garden in the sense that I become part of it. My consciousness is no longer separate, but I've realized that it's teeming with life. And then I realize I'm teeming with life. I'm teeming with energy. I'm filled with energy. What type of energy? And for me, when we're getting into that connection, the only energy that is there is really love, because we're simply just connected to all of it. And there's a natural, quiet harmony, a natural, quiet joy, a natural, quiet love for all of it. Totally different experience. But by being present with myself, present with that which is around me, I find that there's so much more. Now, of course, if I want to explore more, I can even then start to use greater capacity of my imagination and my understanding, and I start to contemplate and become aware of like the whole atomic structure that's vibrating within all these different organisms and all these different flora and fauna and in me, and then all of a sudden you start to realize that there's huge electromagnetic activities going on, and it just becomes so vast that we realize that this is extraordinary. Life is absolutely extraordinary. Any moment, anywhere you are, it's extraordinary. I can assure you, way back when I was living in my career and doing my thing based on everything else, life was not very extraordinary. It was quite dull. It was quite routine. And in comparison, now I can look back and it was horribly boring. In comparison to the richness that is available to me all the time, it was always there. It is always there. This is something that isn't we don't conjure this up from the mind. It's an actual experience that we connect with. And what's fascinating is how little we experience when we're on the planet. How little we do experience in our routines and our relationships and our connections with the outer experiences when we think that that's all there is. And we think those are really fantastic, and they are in their own right. But nothing in comparison to what happens when we're really integrated, interconnected, and when we allow our consciousness to expand, to incorporate vaster and vaster amounts of understanding, information, connection. It's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, I cannot see, there are no words to really describe what it's like to be a part of life itself and actually be in harmony and enjoy with life itself, rather than be at odds with all the problems that we conjure up in our minds that we think are so important. Step away for a moment and realize that they are not important, certainly not to the degree we give it. That's what happens when we go within and keep going within. And it is just more and more that will come forth in our own way for us uniquely.
So to some extent we've just kept that door shut, and if we open it, there's a whole huge world out there of ourselves. So the spiritual part of ourself, I mean, this is something that's there all the time. And what is the physical side of ourselves an aspect of that, or is it all a oneness? And also, is the spiritual aspect of ourselves connected to the spiritual whole of life?
I would certainly say it is all connected. And in fact, if we look at the four bodies, for example, we've been kind of talking about the spiritual body, that higher self, that presence, that animating aspect. I often like to share the quick examples, like, if we're around a person that we've been around all our life, and we know there's an animation going in that physical body, and the person transitions, dies, becomes deceased. Where is that animating principle? Where is all that intelligence that just moments before was operating the cellular level, the synapses, the glandular thing, the organs, all the things that was giving that body life? Where does it go? In other words, where is that animating principle? So, and the reason we share that is because if we see it in those examples, because most of us have had the opportunity to see that example in one way or another, is there's an animating principle in us right now. Let's tune into that animating principle. If we really begin to explore, the vastness of who we are, then we start to realize, well, yeah, we have a physical body. Well, it becomes more obvious that the physical body is an apparatus, a wonderful, incredibly profound vehicle to carry around our consciousness. It allows us to interact with the world around us. It allows us to have the somewhat limited 5 sensory capacity, and one of the things that we have really gotten so conditioned with is we tend to relate to life when we're very physical and outward focused. We relate to our physical body, and we tend to relate to the five senses. But in fact, it's not a true story, because we're still interpreting our sensory activity. Another example I love to share is like when we talk about the senses, we tend to talk about the touch, and we take our hand and say we touch another person, physically touch another person, and say, what are we doing? We're touching another person. That's what we're conditioned to believe. We're conditioned to believe that we're actually touching the other person, we're feeling them, when in fact we are not. We are actually feeling the sensory response to our fingertips. Mm-hmm. We're actually interpreting our physical experience, and then we're saying that we're actually touching that physical body, when in fact we're actually just having a sensory response to an activity. Mm-hmm. It's all personal, and it's all felt through our physical body. There's a physical component. Obviously, it becomes very clear, in this going within, that this is pretty important to take good care of our physical body, because the more in balance it is, the greater capacity we have to explore life, the universe, and everything. If we don't take good care of our body, then it's not necessarily going to be the greatest vehicle to explore our consciousness, because we're going to be focused more on the physicalness of our body. So I've learned to take better care of my physical body, because I realize how extraordinary it is, and it is as spiritual as anything else in my life. Go to the emotional body. This is where we feel everything. This is the accumulation of all of our experiences and the way we felt about them, along with all of the things that we didn't enjoy feeling. And there's this big soup of emotional energy, this aspect of us that is the part that is probably the hardest to actually express or contain in a definition sense, because we feel things so readily. When we feel intense love, where does that come from? It's accumulation of all the potential of love and then some. Well, when we have pain, especially emotional pain, that's when we tend to feel all of these aspects that doesn't feel good, that doesn't make us feel whole and complete. And so exploring emotional body, it's just a field of energy. It's all it is. It's a field of energy that we have actually given qualification to, that we've said this is a good feeling, that's a bad feeling. When we go and expand our consciousness, we start to understand that emotions are just energy. And just like we have choice with our thoughts, we have choice with a feeling. Do I really want to feel this way? Do I feel good about myself, or do I not? Do I feel I'm fearful about things, or do I feel that I'm in harmony with life? Our feelings change according to the attention we give them and the direction we give them. Similar in our mental body, another field of energy. We tend to relate our mental body to our brain. It really is in more ways an aspect of our consciousness, but it's that repository of all the logical, factual information that helps us in this journey. It's the information that we've gathered, and of course, the brain is really great at gathering lots of information. It has no discernment of its own. We are that consciousness that can discern. So a lot of the information that we have, a lot of the beliefs, traditions, rituals, suggestions from others, are simply things we've accepted without questioning. So we have a lot of mental effluvia, a lot of mental capacity, and a lot of mental junk. So part of this exploration of knowing ourselves is also bringing these bodies into greater balance and recognizing the limitations that our mind really presents, that thoughts aren't all that in itself. There's more than just our thoughts. There's our feelings. And we want to bring each of these bodies into balance, because when we have all of our bodies in balance, then we have the greatest experience we can possibly have. We're more present and more aware. Take anyone out. Say if we become very mental about an outer problem, that mental capacity, constantly focusing, constantly worrying, constantly just running our mind, will it begin to affect our feeling. It will begin to erode our feeling. We will not feel good over time. It's called stress. And what happens when we take this highly focused mental thing on a problem, rather than letting go and allowing a solution to come in, because the problem has to have a solution, we begin to affect our emotional world, and we begin to affect our physical world, because the physical body will begin to degrade because it's under stress. It's not operating at its balanced capacity. The same can be said if we go the other way. If we actually do something with our physical body and don't take good care of it, or do something in a way that puts it in jeopardy, The moment our physical body is very prominent in our world, that it's out of balance, and we feel something very strongly in our physical body, it tends to erode our emotional and mental capacity. So all of these will work with each other. If we become so spiritual, and I've seen this with, myself even at times on my journey, where I become so focused on the grandness of all of that which is, that I tend to almost disconnect from my physical, emotional, mental body, and I don't bring it together. And that is an out of balance in its own right. Even though there's a lot of wisdom, we're still in our physical body. We still have to take care of our physical body. We still have to pay attention to our thoughts and our feelings, our emotions and our mental capacity. It works best when we make it a holistic, synergistic, multidimensional aspect. When we understand the energies that are running through us, the ancient Sanskrit word is the chakra systems, where all these energy ley lines come together. There are power centers. There's all this stuff going on in us, and yet it's up to us with our own choice. That's that word that we have used so many times in our conversation, our own choice to bring and strive for greater balance, to bring all these things together. That's where the responsibility comes. That's where the opportunity comes. Because when we do, life becomes much more grand, much more rich, much more fulfilling, much more interesting, much more almost so infinite that we don't know where to even go at times. Like, what is the next part to explore? Because there seems to be no end when we open that door as to where we can go. And yet we will always find the things that are most interesting to us. We will always find the things that resonate. We will always find our own heart center joys to express ourselves. Much of what I do today is because I started coming from my heart. I stopped living out of my mind, and I started coming into my heart, and I started following my own inner wisdom, that greater part of me, and I started doing things that brought me joy, genuine joy. And what's interesting is this type of joy is not a selfish joy where it's all only about me. It's quite the opposite. The inner exploration makes us connected to everything, and then we realize everything we do affects everything else. It was going on before. Everything I did affected everything. But in my limited capacity of understanding, when I only saw the things out, everything else was everybody else's fault. I blamed everything on everything else, and I had no responsibility. And that's from that capacity. A lot of people say, well, what you're doing is the ultimate narcissistic, selfish activity. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually quite the opposite, because when we realize we're connected to everything, we are everything. When we are everything, then we only want to do the things that are truly, as one would say, the golden rule. We want to treat everything with the greatest capacity of compassion and love we possibly can muster, because we realize we're doing it to ourselves, because there is then this vastness of one. That's quite a different experience than where I had been coming from in my business world and what I had been doing prior to this. This was a extraordinarily new frontier for me, because it did not come naturally, did not come easily, because I actually resisted quite a bit of this deeper understanding. I pretty much wanted to keep that door shut. I'm really glad I opened it. I'm really glad I walked through it, because I never looked back.
So now that the door's being opened, where are you going to take us next?
Where would we like to go?
I want to explore this great new world.
Yeah. Exactly, and that's what we will continue to do. We're going to continue to unfold more of this expansion, and we're going to align ourselves. We've kind of taken this process of loving ourselves, going within, understanding, oh wow, we actually have some potential. Now, not only is this potential then on the surface potential that we start to notice, but as we start to dive into it, wow, we have extraordinary potential we can't fathom, at the moment. Well, how do we align with it? How do we take all this vastness and start incorporating it, integrating it, making it so much a natural part of our life, align with all these new, seemingly new tools in our own bag of things that we have available to us, things that we never realized we had available to us. There are ways to align ourselves with this so that we can actually be in the present moment with all this vastness and begin to explore life really with a whole new senses, eyes, ears, you know, that the interconnectedness, I mean, there's so many things. Intuition is one that comes the most to mind, but we have clairaudience, clairvoyance, you know, telepathic ability. There's so many things that are innate to us. We talk about what's going on with that other 95%. How do we start to tune into that? How do we align ourselves so that we can actually have more of these experiences that are sitting there? And even if a person who's watching this right now say that, well, their routine, their life is so mundane and so, you know, it's been this way forever and it will stay this way forever, I can assure each person that there is far more going on than they can possibly imagine at this particular moment. And if they're willing to explore more, they will find a completely new sense of life and well-being that is available to them. Just here right now, sitting right alongside with them, beckoning them to explore more. And that's what we're going to continue on doing in the rest of these conversations.
Good. So we'll leave that till next time.
Yep.
Look forward to that. Okay. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.